Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to take two globally seismic events from the first week of January 2026 and connect them to try and fuse them into a single strategic blueprint.
It's a fascinating puzzle.
It really is. I mean, if you were following the news, you saw it happen. First, U.S. Special Forces pull off this stunning raid in Venezuela, grabbing President Nicolas Maduro.
Right.
Then, just 3 days later, a totally different story. The U.S. Aggressively renews its demand to acquire Greenland from Denmark. One is a military op in the tropics. The other is, high-stakes Arctic diplomacy.
On the surface, they seem completely separate. A drug war on one continent, a land grab on another. But the sources we've been digging into, intelligence assessments, geopolitical forecasts, they tell a very, very different story.
They suggest it wasn't random at all.
Not at all. They point to these events being phase 1 and phase 2 of a single premeditated campaign.
And this is the central question from all the material, and it's frankly a terrifying one. Is the U.S. moving to secure total resource independence in the Western Hemisphere to prepare for a long war? I mean, are they finally saying the quiet part out loud?
Was this the start of the resource wars?
That's the framework, yeah. We have to look past the official stories and see how these huge strategic moves are being, cloaked.
So let's start with Action A, the flashpoint in Venezuela, January 3rd, 2026.
Operation Caracas.
Right, Operation Caracas. The official story was that special forces were there to execute a 2020 indictment against Maduro and his wife for, quote, narco-terrorism.
And this is where the legal architecture is so important. The indictment basically classifies the entire Venezuelan government as a criminal enterprise.
The Cartel de los Soles.
Exactly. And by defining them that way, the U.S. gets to bypass all sorts of international laws about war. You're not invading a sovereign nation. You're just conducting a law enforcement operation. You're arresting a cartel boss.
It's this brilliant piece of legal jujitsu, but there's a precedent for this, isn't there? Oh, absolutely. The sources immediately drew the line back to 1989, Panama.
Manuel Noriega.
Same playbook.
Yeah.
Treat a head of state like a common criminal. It just simplifies everything, and you avoid some very awkward questions at the UN.
But the whole drug war narrative, it just cracked almost instantly.
Yep.
The documents we saw highlight this moment just hours after the raid when President Trump went to speak.
He went completely off script.
Completely. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We're going to have our very large U.S. oil companies go in. We're going to take back the oil."
And there it is, the black gold theory, confirmed right from the top. The real motive was laid bare. Oil. And we have to remember the scale we're talking about here. Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves.
Larger than Saudi Arabia.
Oh, it's larger.
And it's not just any oil,
No.
right? The analysis really zeroes in on the Orinoco Petroleum Belt. Why is that specific crude so vital?
Well, the Orinoco Belt has something like 513 billion barrels of recoverable heavy crude. It's thick, it's sulfurous, it needs special processing. And here's the key. The U.S. Gulf Coast refineries, which are the engine room of American shale production, they are specifically engineered to process that exact type of heavy crude.
So it's a perfect match.
A perfect match. Securing Venezuela is like maximizing the efficiency of your entire refining system overnight. You're feeding it the exact diet it was built for.
So if you're listening to this, the takeaway is the U.S. military is basically providing security for a hostile takeover of the world's biggest gas station.
And the strategic implication is preparing for a long war. Think about it. This move secures an unlimited captive fuel supply right here in the Western Hemisphere.
You're not worried about the Strait of Hormuz anymore.
Or the South China Sea. All those incredibly vulnerable tanker routes, gone, off the table. If you're planning to fuel a war machine for years on end, this is step 1. You eliminate those long, risky supply chains.
Okay, so phase 1 complete, secure the fuel. But this is the part that's still a head snapper for me. The pivot, 3 days later, from the jungle to the ice.
The timing is what makes everyone believe this was coordinated. January 6th, the administration suddenly ramps up its demand for Greenland.
Citing, vague national security concerns.
Right, and Russian and Chinese activity in the Arctic.
Yeah.
But it's clear, if Venezuela was about fuel, Greenland was about the hardware.
I think most people just picture Greenland as, this vast, empty, frozen landmass. But the analysis points to something called the Kvanefjeld Project. What is under all that ice?
Rare earth elements, REs. They're the literal backbone of all modern technology, military and civilian.
And they're not actually rare, right?
No, not really.
Yeah.
But they're rarely found in deposits that are concentrated enough to be profitable to mine. Greenland has one of the biggest known deposits outside of China, Specifically, you're looking at two minerals.
Okay, what are they?
Neodymium, which is essential for the super strong magnets in electric vehicle motors and wind turbines. And then, even more critically for the military, dysprosium.
Dysprosium. Why is that the bottleneck?
Heat resistance. That's the whole game. Think about the engine in an F-35 fighter jet or a missile's guidance system. The magnets have to maintain their power even when they're exposed to, thousands of degrees of heat from the engine or from hypersonic friction.
Without it, the tech fails.
Without dysprosium, you just can't build a reliable, high-performance, heat-resistant motor. Full stop.
And the current crisis, as I understand it, is that China controls something like 90% of the processing. It's not the mining, it's the refining.
Exactly right. And China has absolutely weaponized that monopoly. If Beijing decides to slow down or cut off the supply, the entire U.S. military-industrial complex just grinds to a halt in a matter of months.
So acquiring Greenland and its minerals it's about breaking that chokehold overnight.
It's the ultimate insurance policy for your tech, but that's only one layer of it. The sources also highlight this isn't just about rocks. It's prime military real estate.
The geography?
It's all about the GIUK gap.
Explain that for us. The GIUK gap, Greenland, Iceland, UK.
It's a classic Cold War naval choke point. It's the only practical way for Russia's entire northern fleet to get out into the open Atlantic. If you control Greenland, you can turn that massive stretch of ocean into what analysts are calling a closed lake.
A kill zone.
A kill zone. You could line the seabed with sonar arrays, put up anti-ship missile batteries, and just bottle up Russia's most powerful naval assets. It completely changes the strategic map of the North Atlantic.
And this would involve expanding the existing U.S. base there, Thule Air Base.
The thinking is to expand Thule, or Patufic as it's now called, into a major launch platform for next-gen weapons. It's the perfect forward-deployed site for hypersonic missiles. You have a clear shot over the North Pole to both Beijing and Moscow.
So you put the two pieces together, heavy oil from Venezuela, the fuel, and rare earths from Greenland, the hardware. It really doesn't feel accidental anymore.
No, it feels like a very deliberate move toward comprehensive independence from global supply chains.
The Fortress America blueprint.
In practice, yes. It's setting up the U.S. to fight a long, protracted war without needing a stable global trade system to feed its military.
Okay, but we have to talk about the anomaly here. The geopolitical curveball that came right after the Caracas raid. The Israeli connection. The silent partner.
That was an immediate red flag for analysts.
Yeah.
Of all the world leaders, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu was one of the only ones to give immediate, just glowing praise. He called it a perfect operation, a victory for the civilized world.
Which raises the question, why does Israel care so much about a supposed drug bust 7,000 miles away in Venezuela?
Because Venezuela, under Maduro, was a critical piece of Iran's axis of resistance. It was a safe harbor, a logistics hub.
A place for Hezbollah and Iranian agents to operate.
Exactly. And maybe more importantly, it was a key part of the scheme to bypass U.S. sanctions on Iran.
The gold for fuel scheme. Let's dig into that. What was happening?
Well, it was a simple trade, really. Iran was desperate for hard currency, and Venezuela needed refined fuel but had plenty of gold, so Venezuela would fly huge amounts of gold out.
On Iranian planes.
Often on Mahan Air, which is tied directly to the Revolutionary Guard. They'd swap the gold for Iranian fuel and technical help. It was a billion-dollar lifeline, keeping both regimes afloat.
So the shadow war theory that's been floated suggests this was a coordinated move, a geopolitical trade.
The theory is that Mossad assets may have helped locate Maduro or provided key intelligence for the raid, and in exchange, the U.S. took a major Iranian proxy off the board.
So the U.S. gets its oil security.
And Israel gets a huge strategic win. They cut a critical financial artery for the entire axis of resistance. It's an elegant strategy, really. It merges the old war on terror goals with the new great power competition. You're hitting Iran's network and securing resources for a fight with China all in one move.
So Fortress America is being built with Washington and Jerusalem as the architects. But if this is preparation from the U.S. perspective, how does it look from Beijing and Moscow?
The consensus from the sources we've read is existential panic. They don't see this as preparation. They see the U.S. building a siege engine around them.
And for Russia, the loss is immediate.
It's severe. They lose their only reliable refueling stop for their Tu-160 nuclear bombers in the Western Hemisphere. And their northern fleet, their crown jewel, is now facing a militarized GIUK gap.
But the real existential threat is for China. What is the fundamental problem for them now?
The problem is that China's entire economic model depends on energy and raw materials that come from far away, through vulnerable sea lanes. They see a U.S. that is now totally self-sufficient in energy and critical minerals, and they know what comes next.
Like blockade.
A total prolonged naval blockade becomes a much more viable option for the U.S.
Which brings us to this dangerous game theory scenario, the use it or lose it moment.
That's it. Chinese strategists know that they have a window. Once the U.S. fully integrates that Venezuelan oil and starts processing Greenland's minerals, maybe 18 to 24 months, the U.S. becomes almost unbeatable in a long war.
So they can't wait.
They can't wait. It forces their hand. This is very much like a historical echo.
World War II.
A direct parallel. When the U.S. started strangling Japan's oil supply in the 1930s, Japan didn't wait. They attacked Manchuria and Southeast Asia to grab the resources they needed before launching their main attack on Pearl Harbor.
Great powers don't just wither when strangled, they lash out.
They lash out to secure what they need to survive.
So if the U.S. just locked down the fuel in Venezuela and the hardware in Greenland, what's the one critical piece left that China must have?
Taiwan. The logic is inescapable. If the U.S. controls the raw materials, China have to control the high-end manufacturing. Taiwan produces 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors.
So this whole grand strategy, it all points to one inevitable conclusion.
An imminent Chinese military assault on Taiwan. They have to grab the chips to complete their own self-sufficient supply chain before the American siege engine is fully operational.
So let's put it all together. The Fortress America endgame. You secure all the raw materials in the Western Hemisphere to create a self-sustaining ecosystem that can outlast a global war.
And then you deliver the checkmate move, the strangulation protocol. And that move is all about one place on the map,
The Strait of Malacca.
the jugular vein. 80% of China's oil imports go through that one narrow channel
And now the U.S. has the leverage to close it.
because they have their own supply. The logic is brutal. We have our oil safe in our hemisphere. You don't have yours. That's the siege.
So with the board set like this, what do the analysts predict as the immediate triggers, the black swan events that could kick this off in the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
There are two main predictions. First, an asymmetric attack. Since China and Russia know they can't win a long conventional war against a resource-independent America, they go for a cyber Pearl Harbor, a massive coordinated strike on infrastructure, the power grid, the banking system.
And the second one is financial, retaliation for Venezuela.
It's the BRICS nations making a move to officially dump the U.S. dollar for oil trading. As payback for the resource seizure, they could trigger a massive devaluation of the dollar, sparking hyperinflation in the West.
And to control that chaos at home, while America integrates all these new resources, the sources predict an internal control measure.
The rollout of a central bank digital currency, a CBDC. It probably wouldn't be introduced as some new tech, but disguised as a necessity, like war rationing 2.0.
A way for the government to control consumption.
And make sure all those new resources from Venezuela and Greenland go to the military first. A CBDC gives you that kind of granular control.
So let's circle back for a final verdict on this single, terrifying campaign.
The sources are pretty unequivocal. The war is already here. It's a ruthless game of musical chairs being fought over raw materials. Oil, rare earths, semiconductors. The U.S. decided the era of infinite resources was over, and it used its power to grab the last two chairs for itself.
To sum it up, the core connection. Venezuela was the gas station. Greenland was the hardware store.
In Israel, the silent partner was the watchtower. And you have to remember, empires never tell you they're preparing for war. They say they're fighting drugs or protecting national security.
It's a sobering thought. And it leaves you with this final, really provocative question. Did U.S. actions, this Fortress America plan, did it simply prepare the nation for a long conflict? Or did it actively force China's hand, pushing them into a dangerous, immediate offensive move out of pure necessity?
And that's the razor's edge between preparation and provocation.
Something for you to think about this week. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.